people at least on the ground, many of them medical students, because remember, this flight crashed onto a building, a hostel mess for medical students. There are at least 24 of them who are feared dead. Prime Minister Modi was in Ahmedabad today. He met with some of the family members of the victims. He also expressed his deep anguish and grief. But 24 hours on the black box, which is the most important instrument, it has been recovered. It has two very important components, the CDR, which is the CVR, the cockpit voice recorder, and the FDR, which is the flight data recorder, both of which have now been recovered. The black box really holds the key to answering what is the most important question, the million-dollar question that everybody in India, around the world, at Boeing and Air India, and of course, most importantly, the families of the victims are asking, and that is, what is it that caused Flight AI-171 to crash? So first things first, let's tell you what this black box is, why it is important in the context of this crash and indeed any other crash. The black box has been the focus in the backdrop of this crash. Contrary to what the name suggests, the black box is not actually black, it is bright orange in color. It includes two components, two very important devices which are tough. They're designed to survive extreme situations, whether it's crashes, fires, even deep water pressure. It can survive up to 1000 degrees centigrade. One of the components in the black box is called a flight data recorder, or the FDR. The FDR basically tracks everything about the flight, from its speed to its altitude to engine health, even the pilot's control inputs, the manual inputs that are being fed in. The second important component is what's called the cockpit voice recorder, or the CVR. It basically records all the conversations that happen inside the cockpit, whether it's from pilot to air traffic control or air traffic control to pilot, or even background noises like alarms, engine noise, etc. Both of these devices are critical in understanding what happened and what caused the crash of AI-171. Now that we know what a black box is, let's try and break that down further as to why the recovery of this, and that too this quickly, and from whatever we're picking up from the ground, both these devices seem to be in fairly good condition, so which means the data from both these devices can be quickly retrieved. Apart from the fact that the black box stores about 25 hours of detailed flight data, crucial data, in fact, which the investigators can use to recreate what exactly happened moment by moment, which led to the crash at 1:39 p.m. yesterday. Once it's recovered, the black box is sent to a high-tech forensic lab under the Director General of Civil Aviation, the DGCA, and also the Air Accident Investigation Board, the AIIB, which will be the points people for investigating as to what happened to Flight AI-171. The experts then extract and decode the memory modules, they synchronize the voice and flight data recorders, as well as correlate findings with radar logs and air traffic control records. The process can take anywhere between several days to a few weeks, depending on the damage that these devices have incurred. Right now, the word we're getting in from Ahmedabad is that these two devices seem to be largely intact. The devices play a crucial role in solving major aviation disasters. Some of the examples would be the German Wings crash that happened in 2015 and the Malaysia Airlines incident, the MH370 incident. In India, the 2020 Kozhikode crash investigation relied heavily on these recordings to find out what exactly caused those crashes. So even as we wait to know more about what really led to this tragedy, aviation experts believe that a number of theories could have been at play. It's clear that there is a degree of loss of lift, which means there is not enough engine power to lift or give additional thrust to this aircraft as it is taking off. This is one of the theories. Experts note that the plane appears to maintain a nose-up altitude. If you look at the way it went up in those 30 seconds between going up and then eventually descending like a rock, like a huge rock down and crashing, it has a nose-up altitude, and then the takeoff was perfect, but the aircraft then started descending, which can only happen in case the engine loses power, the aircraft simply stops developing further lift to move up, reach higher altitudes. No flaps on the takeoff, though it's not very clear from these visuals because it's a distant visual. It's been recorded from the airport complex itself. It's not very clear whether the back flaps were on or off. But these visuals do show that the aircraft's landing gear was not retracted. Usually the landing gear is retracted within a few feet of the aircraft taking off. Experts believe that the pilot could have accidentally retracted the flaps and not the gear. As said earlier, the landing gear is down. Another possible reason for this could be because of mechanical or hydraulic failure. We don't know that. We will get to know that from the cockpit voice recorder and from the flight data recorder. Bird hit is a very possible explanation. A lot of experts have suggested that, because why would both engines fail at the same time? That is a 1 in a million possibility. So one theory is, and we've seen this in the 2009 Captain Sully example, where he was flying over New York and he crashed into the Hudson River. That was a flock of birds that went into the engine and basically disengaged both the engines at the same time. In this case, we don't have any visual evidence of any bird carcasses, or at least from these pictures, we can't seem to say that there was a flock of birds. It's not one or two birds, but it has to be a flock of birds that enter the engine at the same time and disable both engines at the exact same time. Also, when a bird hit happens, you will see the engine sputtering. You will see fire or smoke from the back of the engine. We can't see that from these visuals. Another theory that's doing the rounds is that dual engine failure. Experts say that the trajectory shows that the plane stalled because of loss of lift, loss of thrust, and maybe not necessarily because of loss of engine power, but we will probe that in just a moment. Beneath this gloom of the tragedy in which 265 people at last count have perished is also a tale of unbelievable miracle. The story of one man out of 242, one man survived. His name is Vishwas Ramesh Kumar. The 40-year-old is the lone survivor of this crash. He is now explaining in his own words how he cheated death.
जब टेक ऑफ हुआ ना तो सडनली 5-10 सेकंड कैसे लगा जैसे स्टक हो गया वो। बाद में से मेरे को लगा कि कुछ हुआ। बाद में प्लेन में लाइट ऑन हो गई, ग्रीन और वाइट। बाद में वो पता नहीं वो प्लेन टेक ऑफ ज़्यादा करने के लिए वो रेस तो बोलते हैं क्या, रेस दिया होगा ऐसा कुछ, और सीधा स्पीड में ही घुस गया। मैं जहाँ लैंड हुआ था ना वो नीचे की साइड थी, तो जब वहाँ थोड़ा पेस भी था प्लेन के जब बाहर, तो जब जैसे मेरा डोर टूटा ना सब, तो मैंने देखा ना जब सामने कि थोड़ा इधर पेस है, तो मैं ट्राई कर सकता हूँ निकलने के लिए, तो मैंने ट्राई किया निकलने के लिए, तो फिर मैं निकल गया उधर, क्योंकि अपोजिट साइड पे थे ना वो बिल्डिंग का वो था ना दीवार, तो उधर से कोई शायद नहीं निकल सका होगा।
But Vishwas Kumar is the only passenger to have survived the fatal crash. Hundreds of families are still searching for the remains of their loved ones. The difficulty is in arriving at the DNA samples from the wreckage site and, of course, matching it with family members. It's a process that's going to take a long time because a lot of these bodies would have been charred beyond recognition. You won't even be able to get, hair or fingernails. At least in some degree, they have to be intact for the DNA samples to be matched. Let's listen in to some of the families who are still waiting for their loved ones.
जो हॉस्टल है ना, छोकरे कॉलेज में पढ़ने आते हैं ना, रोटी पकाने जाती है मेरी औरत, तो हम टिफिन भर के निकल गए थे। तो बाद में 1:30 बजे बन गया इधर, तो छोकरे को देखने गए लापता है कुछ औरत में, छोकरी 2 बरस की बच्ची है।
मेरी बेटी तो गुजर चुका है, लेकिन हम लोग को कुछ तो खबर मिलना चाहिए ना, कुछ नहीं मिला है।
All right, it's a global exclusive. We're getting the man who seems to have broken the internet with his theory, most plausible theory, let's put it that way, as to why Air India flight AI-171 from Ahmedabad to London crashed. Captain Steve is a US Navy veteran. He's now flying commercial for a number of years. Of course, he has a YouTube channel where he's a viral internet sensation. And the video that you put up earlier this morning, Captain Steve, first of all, thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. But the video that you put up, you sort of parsed what could likely be the most plausible explanation for why flight AI-171 went down. Let's go by, each of those theories one by one. First, bird hit, which is the most common cause of both engines going down, most famously in 2009, the Captain Sully example. Why do you believe what happened yesterday in Ahmedabad is not a bird hit?
Well, it's a possibility, but we don't see any birds in the video. Now, the video is from a distance and it's grainy, but it would have to be a lot of birds to take out both engines at the same time. In Sully's case, he had a flock of Canadian geese, and those are extremely large birds. We would see those in the video. I don't think they're indigenous to the area. It would have to be a lot of small birds, and then there's no evidence coming out the back of the engine of fire, sparks, or the engines coming apart. So without any smoke, any fire, or any sparks, I don't believe that they hit anything. I think that the engines were operating at full capacity.
Why do you think then the aircraft was not getting lift? If the engines were working, why was the aircraft not able to, at least from the pictures, that's what we can deduce, and that's what you've deduced as well. Why was it not getting lift then?
So the aircraft does get lift initially. It rotates off at a normal rate of rotate. They climb up right about the point where the pilot flying would ask for the gear to be raised up into the aircraft. That never happens. Now, I don't know if he asked for it or didn't. We don't know. We don't have a voice recorder yet. But the gear never comes up. And so the gear creates a tremendous amount of drag. At some point shortly after that, within a few seconds, the aircraft starts to lose lift. The only plausible explanation for that is the loss of power theory, which again, it could have been fuel contamination. It could have been birds. My theory is it's not likely either one of those things happened. It could be that the wing was reconfigured. In other words, it went from flaps out for takeoff to flaps being retracted. And again, this is just my opinion. What could have happened in that cockpit was instead of raising the gear, because the gear handle is very close to where the flap handle is, if the pilot mistakenly grabbed the wrong handle and raised the flaps, that would start a chain of events that you probably couldn't recover from at that low an altitude.
Can you explain this and break this down, in layman's language for our viewers to understand? Why are the flaps important to be kept open or in whatever degree or angle they are at the time of takeoff? And in this case, if that didn't happen, you're saying that could be one of the reasons why the aircraft didn't get lift, and after about 600 odd feet, it started descending down. Why is that important? If you could explain that in layman terms.
Yeah, certainly. In order to take off, the airplane is slow. It's as slow as it's ever going to be when it's taking off. It's as heavy as it's ever going to be. And all your power is up and forward. So you don't have any spare power to add if you get into a bad situation. So it's the most critical phase of flight. And so we changed the shape of the wing from front to back. There's something called slats at the front of the wing that come down, and then there's flaps at the back of the wing that come out, and that change in the shape of the wing creates much more lift. It also creates more drag, but we overcome that with power. Now, when you raise the gear, you get rid of a tremendous amount of drag by putting those landing gear back up into the airplane. The flaps are creating that extra lift over the wing. As you climb out, when you're in the back of a jet, you feel it do that steep takeoff. You think you're on a rocket. That's because the flaps are out and the gear has come up into the aircraft. Then at the appropriate speed, and that's the key word, the appropriate speed, you begin to retract the flaps and change the shape of the wing back to a more aerodynamic shape so that you can speed up and accelerate. You don't want those flaps out for the entire flight. They're just there for takeoff and landing. But if they're retracted prematurely, it diminishes or takes away the lift potential of that wing at a time when the gear is down, and that's a bad combination. The gear is very heavy and causing drag, and the wing is changing shape at 200 or 300 feet when it should be based on speed up at 2,000 or 3,000 feet, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to you.
Yeah. Also about the landing gear. There are people, on social media who've said that if the pilot realized that he's not getting lift and he has to make an emergency landing, then it's better the gear is out rather than in. How would you see that?
Well, if he had runway in front of him and he wanted to make an emergency landing on that runway, yeah, you would want the gear to be down. I don't think the gear was ever raised, and that's the issue. At the point where the flight path is normal, where they rotate off the ground and they're climbing out at a normal climb angle, that's when the pilot would ask for the gear up. The gear doesn't budge. The gear handle never got touched. So he gets up to about 600 feet. That's well beyond when the gear would be raised. Normally in my airplane at about 50 to 100 feet, I ask for the gear up. The gear would be almost all the way up by 600 feet. The gear stays out the whole time. That's why, again, we're not going to know until they get the black box information and they know for sure what the conversation was between the two pilots, whether the other pilot mistakenly grabbed the flap handle instead of the gear handle. If he did that, it would explain the flight profile after they rotate, where the airplane kind of wallows and then it just doesn't achieve flight. The nose comes up and then it pancakes off the end of the runway. So that explains a lot. It's a theory, but again, I don't think they lost power, and it's just a tragedy. It's so sad.
If indeed this is, and like I said, right at the top, this is the most plausible explanation that the co-pilot mistakenly moved the flap handle as opposed to the gear handle. Did they have enough time to react and correct that?
Well, so you got to put yourself in the position of the pilot's flying or the pilot flying. He has just asked for the gear up. So what would you think? You think if you see somebody next to you move towards a handle, you think they've raised the flap or they've raised the gear. If they mistakenly grab the other handle, it's going to take a second or two to process all of that. He's looking out and seeing his airspeed now decreasing, his altitude now decreasing. Naturally, you're going to want to pull up on the nose or put more power on the airplane. All the whole time assuming that the gear is on its way up. It wasn't. And so in the 5 to 10 seconds it takes to sort all that out and correct it, that airplane's already pancaking into the ground. This whole event takes place in less than, about 30 seconds?
Yeah. And finally, the final theory, which is that of fuel contamination. I think there's been one example in the past. I think it was a British Airways plane. It was certainly over the UK, where they found fuel contamination leading to both engines seizing and thereby the flight crashed. You don't buy that theory either.
Well, I think they would have known the fuel was contaminated when they were driving down the runway. When they pushed the power up, they would get some indication the engines would begin to sputter or stall. They have no indication at that. At least we don't see any of that from the photos. They rotated a normal spot on the runway. They climb out for at least for the first 300 or 400 feet normally. If it was fuel contamination, the fuel vehicles that they use to fill the trucks have sensors on them that sense water or any contamination in the fuel at all. And they're very sensitive. If there's even a drop of water in the fuel, the machine automatically shuts off fueling to that jet. So I haven't heard of fuel contamination in decades. To me, it's a very unlikely. And if it was fuel contamination, the idea that both engines failed at the exact same time because of the fuel contamination, it makes it even less plausible.
All right, Captain Steve, thank you very much. It's been insightful and really eye-opening speaking with you and trying to understand what could have possibly gone wrong with flight AI 171. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right, let's get a view from our experts here as well as to that most plausible explanation. Again, I want to add the caveat. We won't know the full story until the black box data is recovered and the investigators piece together both the cockpit voice recorder as well as the flight data recorder as to what exactly happened that led to the crash of AI 171. Captain Sam Thomas is a former pilot and president of the Airline Pilots Association of India. Here in our studios, Group Captain retired MJ Vinod, former fighter pilot of the Indian Air Force. Group Captain, let me start with you first. You heard what Captain Steve had to say. He says, according to him, the most plausible explanation is that the co-pilot pulled the wrong lever instead of pulling in the landing gear, and we can see the landing gear is very much out there, even when the plane is going down. Instead of pulling up the landing gear, he must have pulled the lever that pulled out the flaps. Do you think that's possible?
But that is one of the possibility. But here, Zaka, I would also like to draw the viewers' attention and your attention to this particular aircraft had electrical malfunction issues when it rolled out in 2013. The lithium polymer batteries or lithium ion batteries that was used in this aircraft gave certain electrical malfunctions issues. So aeroplane was down for a while. If you look at the video, it is absolutely a normal takeoff up until the point where the gear should have gone up.
Why do you think it didn't go up?
It didn't go up.
Why?
So the first thing that happens is positive rate. The co-pilot calls out, the pilot PNF, they used to call earlier pilot not flying. Nowadays he's called the
co-pilot.
PM, pilot monitoring. The pilot monitoring says positive rate. The pilot flying could be the captain or the pilot in command or could be the other guy. I mean, you can alternate between PM and PF.
Okay.
But PIC is the captain of the aircraft. So in this case, we don't know as yet who was pilot flying and who was pilot monitoring. It could be the captain was pilot monitoring.
Okay.
So the pilot monitoring says positive rate or positive climb, and the pilot flying says gear up. And the pilot monitoring now puts the gear up. Now he's ever eager with his hand, waiting to put the gear up. So which is why, and it is, I mean, in my 37 years of career, I have never heard of a case where you're not itching to put the gear up. Because if, when, like Steve said, when the gear goes up is the time you start accelerating. You start going like he said, going like a rocket.
Yeah, because
and
the gear is a
to,
drag, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's holding back your
absolutely, and
lift.
you want to go like a rocket. So you want to get out of terra firma quickly. So you're itching to put the gear up, and you're looking at the positive rate. When the positive rate sets in, you say positive rate or positive climb, depending on which aeroplane you're flying, and the gear goes up. In this case, the gear has not gone up, the flaps has gone up, and to add to what Steve said, the flaps, Zaka, in this case is called the double slotted Fowler flap. The double slotted Fowler flap increases the lift by 120%, which means if the aeroplane is producing a lift of say 100 units, it will produce with flaps out 240 or 220 units. And that is required.
And yet this aircraft was not getting lift.
No,
right?
it got the lift and it got airborne very beautifully. I mean, this is a normal takeoff like we are seeing on the screen. Up until this point, it is a normal takeoff. It has gone to 15 degrees of angle. Now, the nose angle is also very, for an uninitiated, it is something which gives a false feeling that aeroplane is climbing. No. The angle between the nose and the flight path is called the angle of attack. Suppose the nose is like this and the aeroplane is climbing. Angle of attack is very minimal, 2 or 3 or 4. But same nose angle, but if the aeroplane is sinking like this, the angle of attack is 15 or 16. That is what we see here. As it goes down, notice now, the right wing goes down, the left wing goes down. Very clear-cut case of stall. That's
what Steve was saying, that it's pancaking. That's
the falling leaf
kind
of maneuver.
That he used. Let me ask Captain Sam Thomas, because he was here with us last night as well. So even on last night's show, the two most plausible explanations, and I'm sure you remember this, was 1, bird hit, and 2, fuel contamination. And both of that, I'm sure you heard what Captain Steve had to say. He doesn't see evidence of either of those two possibilities, and therefore he's come up with this explanation. What do you make of that?
Zaka, I'm amazed at how confidently people can talk about this. All throughout I've been watching that Captain Steve as well, and he plausible. I'd like him to do. I hope he's rated on the 787, and this airplane with 36 degrees and complete weight, that's max takeoff weight, with the gear down, will climb normally even if you retract the flaps. Having said that, the flap lever and the gear lever are in 2 different places. It's highly unlikely that somebody who's rated on the aircraft will put the flap lever up instead of the gear lever. How he arrived at that theory, I don't know. But it's incredibly brave of him to have said that. As far as the bird hit is, I can for certain say that it's not a bird engines to flame out. You would require at least 100 birds. And if you notice, the geese, the Canadian geese, are not native to Ahmedabad, and this is not the migratory season. And what we have is small eagles and stuff like that. That doesn't really affect the 787 engines. They are large engines. And positive knowledge on this, people I have noticed have come out explanations that are far away from what and not just on this particular channel, all over, it's over. So we'd like to state that this misinformation and people claiming to be experts is causing a little bit of anxiety within the traveling public, at least. So, I would not hazard a guess.
Fair enough. Like I said, all of these are plausible explanations. Maybe they're wrong, maybe they're right. We don't know. We will only know once the black box is recovered and the data is recovered. But I do want to know what you think. One of the things that Captain Steve said is, if this flight's climbed up to 600 feet, why the landing gear has not gone in? Now, either of two things could have happened. Either the gear was not pulled in, or the wrong lever was pulled in, or the captain didn't realize that the gear had not been pulled in. Because what explains why at 600 feet the landing gear is still out?
Okay, on rotation, this again is another thing that you suppose on rotation, as you've taken off, you notice an engine malfunction.
Okay.
Then, if it's a two-engine malfunction, the checklist is loss of thrust on both engines. That checklist, if you notice, says, keep the gear down because you're at a very low altitude. It's loss of thrust on both engines, if that happens. If one engine, no problem, it's positive rate, gear up. That's the call. But if you see malfunction on both engines, then you don't really, it's because at that altitude, you have no option but to put the airplane straight down. And at that time, see, what's in your mind is you're not expecting buildings, like it's very sad that very big buildings come up in close proximity to the airport. You have a clear way, and in that, if you lose your engine, you should have sufficient and see, this airplane, if there were no buildings, might have landed with minimal injuries with this particular configuration. And again, I'm saying that with the gear down, with both engines functioning normally, this aircraft will climb out at max takeoff weight, 36 to 38 degrees Celsius temperature will ease.
Okay. I want Group Captain to respond to that. He says, in his flying experience, that's not the reason. I mean, he doesn't think the landing gear being out is out of the ordinary. I mean, maybe out of the ordinary, but couldn't have been the plausible explanation for why this flight crashed.
What he's saying is, with the gear down, and if the flaps were not retracted, aeroplane can climb out, accelerate, absolutely. I mean, there is no two ways.
So why did it happen in this case?
In this case, 120% of lift you lost. The flaps went up, and
no, that's not what he's saying. He's saying even if the flaps went out,
even
there is enough lift, enough power to give it height.
No, if the flap goes up,
120%. Sir, with 120% lift at 5 degrees of flap, you don't get, sir. You're right as far as a landing configuration is concerned. But on takeoff, sir, on flaps 5, it doesn't. Please try in one of the simulators, put up the flaps, and it will climb, sir. At full thrust on both engines, it will climb, sir.
No, so I'm coming back, I'm asking both of you, then what explains why it didn't climb?
The margin between something called the VLS, or the very low speed, and the stall margin, and your current speed is in a full heavily laden configuration like this is maximum 3 to 4 kmph, 1 or 2 knots. You're barely touching the very low speed regime. So at that time, if the flap goes up, what happens is there's something called a babu pole. It straight away comes up and you straight away get into stall condition of flight.
So just in the last 20 minutes, we've had differing theories among experts as to what led to the crash of flight AI 171. So I want to add that caveat, a note of caution again and again, that look, no one on television, otherwise none of the experts quite know exactly what led to this crash. What we do know is, yes, from those pictures, there are certain plausible explanations. Which of those is true, we will only know once the black box is gone through and all the data is recovered from there, and that could take weeks, if not months. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, though, Captain Thomas, Group Captain Vinod here in our studios. All right, let's quickly move on to the second story, which is the situation in the Middle East, which seems to be escalating. A day after issuing a warning, Israel today launched major strikes on Iran. Dozens of military targets, including nuclear sites. Many of the nuclear sites across the length and breadth of Iran were taken out. In retaliation, Iran launched hundreds of armed drones towards Israel. But the military back and forth has raised fears that this conflict between these two countries, the two most powerful militaries in the Middle East, could escalate now into an all-out war. Here's all that you need to know about this evolving situation. The Israeli military said it struck Iran early Friday morning, attacking dozens of military targets, including its nuclear sites in different areas of the country. The scale of the attacks and the damage that have been left behind are not immediately clear, but this is the most far-reaching strikes that Israel has undertaken on Iran. The strikes did raise the fears that this long-simmering conflict between Tehran and Tel Aviv could escalate now into an all-out regional war. These are the two most powerful militaries in the Middle East. Here's the latest that you need to know about the situation. Explosions rocked Iran's capital Tehran early Friday morning. Iran's state media showed blasts all across the city. There was smoke and fire billowing out from buildings. The skies were quickly cleared of all civilian flights. Both Israeli and Iranian airspace is currently shut. A senior Iranian official said that a compound in Tehran where senior military commanders were living, Saharak Shahid Mahalati, had been attacked. He also said that the 3 residential buildings in the nearby vicinity have also been demolished. The commander-in-chief of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, General Hossein Salami, has been killed in the Israeli strikes. Iranian state television has confirmed his death along with other senior officials of the IRGC. The deputy commander of Iran's armed forces, General Gholmali Rashid, and Fariuddin Abbasi, who's a nuclear scientist who was also involved in the nuclear negotiations, he too has been confirmed dead. Residents in other Iranian cities like Isfahan, Arak, and Kermanshah, which house military and industrial complexes, have also reported hearing multiple explosions over the last few hours. A senior Iranian official said that Iranian fighter jets had taken off to respond to the strike. Iran, in response, has sent over 100 drones in Israel's direction. Israeli officials say the strike was preemptive. In a statement, the Israeli military said it acted in response to the Iranian regime's ongoing aggression against Israel. It also said that there would be more strikes to come, saying that this attack is the first stage of the strikes. An Israeli military official who briefed reporters said that strikes had targeted key elements of Iran's nuclear program, as well as its long-range missile capabilities. He also said that Iran has been advancing a secret program to assemble a nuclear weapon, which Israeli intelligence had procured. The assessment in Israeli intelligence circles is that Iran has enough nuclear material to assemble a nuclear bomb within a fortnight. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Iran's nuclear program a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival. He put out a video statement in which he said that Israel had also attacked Iran's main nuclear enrichment facility in the Natanz desert. He also said that Iran's leading nuclear scientists and its top commanders of the Iran Revolutionary Guard have also been targeted.
In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival. 80 years ago, the Jewish people were the victims of a Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazi regime. Today, the Jewish state refuses to be a victim of a nuclear Holocaust perpetrated by the Iranian regime.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is distancing itself from Israel's strikes. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in a statement that the United States was not involved in any way in the strikes against Iran. He also said that Israel advised America that they believe this action was necessary in Israel's self-defense. Rubio also warned Iran against any form of retaliation against U.S. forces who were stationed in the region. The Israeli strike followed months of disagreement between President Donald Trump of the United States and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on how to handle Iran. Trump has discouraged Israel from attacking Iran, while US-Iran nuclear talks are ongoing. Just hours before the attack, Trump said that an attack would likely destroy any chance whatsoever for a diplomatic solution. America and Iran have had 5 rounds of discussions on Iran's nuclear program so far, with a 6th one which was slated for later this weekend. Those talks are being mediated by Muscat. But there is no confirmation whether those talks will proceed after the Israeli strikes.
There's a chance of massive conflict. We have a lot of American people in this area, and I said, we got to tell them to get out because something could happen soon. And I don't want to be the one that didn't give any warning and missiles are flying into their buildings. It's possible. So I had to do it. I had the choice. Do I do it or not? Doing it has its downside, but it also has its upside. Like, you're going to save a lot of lives if it should happen. Hopefully that doesn't happen.
Anticipating a regional escalation, the United States earlier this week withdrew its diplomats. On Wednesday, it authorized the voluntary departure of families of U.S. soldiers who were posted in Kuwait and in Bahrain. About 40,000 U.S. military personnel are stationed in the Persian Gulf and elsewhere in the Middle East. America has military interests, it has military bases, including, of course, its fundamental interest in the defense of Israel. The U.S. aircraft carrier Carl Vinson, armed with the F-35 attack fighter jets, is also streaming in the Arabian Sea. Israel's military chief of staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, warned in a televised address that Iran's response was likely to be different from the previous two counterattacks. Netanyahu and his defense minister Israel Katz decided Monday that the attack would happen on Friday in coordination with the military chief of staff. It has been coined as Operation Rising Lion. Israel, in response, has closed its airspace to all civilian traffic. All flights arriving at or departing from the Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv have been suspended. Israel also attacked at least 6 military bases around Tehran, including Parchin, as well as residential homes at 2 highly secure complexes that were meant for military commanders. Israel has also taken out some of the senior leadership of the IRGC in what appears to be targeted assassinations. A critical question now is whether the United States will play an extensive role in defending Israel from an Iranian counterattack. The previous Biden administration had done so when both countries had exchanged blows last year. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has made no mention of any American role in the statement that he put out tonight, saying that America's top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Some prominent Trump supporters are already calling for the U.S. to stay out of this conflict. Without American assistance, Israeli defenses could be overwhelmed by a barrage of Iranian ballistic missiles. Israel appears to have now entered a new phase in its attacks against Iran, both critical personnel and its nuclear facilities. For years now, Israel targeted Iran's senior military leadership and many of its top nuclear scientists in individual assassination attempts. In fact, the country's former chief nuclear scientist was killed in a robotic assassination some years ago. But some of the strikes tonight appear to be part of an effort to kill such key personnel en masse. All right, CNN's Oren Lieberman is now joining us live from Jerusalem. Oren, thanks for speaking with us. What is the Israeli government saying? What is the latest? Earlier this morning, they launched multiple airstrikes. They took out some of the key nuclear facilities of Iran. Also, some key military commanders have been taken out as well. What's the latest you're hearing from the Israeli government?
The short answer, Zaka, is that this may not be over yet. Israel has made clear that this could be a prolonged operation that will last not hours, but days. And we've already been following this as we speak for more than 12 hours since the strikes first began, not only on some of the key nuclear facilities, but across Iran, in the capital of Tehran, and against some of the top leadership when it comes to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, as well as top nuclear officials. You see the level of preparation that has gone into this, and the willingness, frankly, that we're seeing from Israel to keep pushing this. They said just a short time ago they have taken out surface-to-surface missiles. Earlier today, they said they have taken out some of the surface-to-air missiles. That has given the Israeli Air Force essentially the ability to do, and this is what we're looking at, frankly, whatever it wants as it keeps carrying out strikes in Iran. And the signal from Israel is that this will continue. At the same time, Israel is preparing for what's expected to be at least potentially a very powerful Iranian response, larger than what we've seen in the past 2 retaliatory attacks from Iran. And that includes perhaps hundreds of ballistic missiles, drones. That's what the country is preparing itself for. That's why Israel remains on an emergency footing right now.
Also, Oren, we've heard from President Trump sometime back commenting on Truth Social. It's his first comments after Israel launched these strikes on Iran. How is it being viewed there in Israel?
For Benjamin Netanyahu, it is exactly what he wants to hear, that he has, at least right now, the support of President Donald Trump. let's remember that it was just a couple of days ago that Trump told Netanyahu to tone down on the threatening rhetoric, to tone down on warnings of an attack on Iran. And now it's completely different. Trump, it seems, sees a successful Israeli attack on Iran and is throwing his full support, at least as of right now, behind Israel. He is still urging Iran to negotiate. Hard to see how there's any possibility of that happening. It very much seems like this attack was meant to derail ongoing negotiations. Meanwhile, we are expecting Netanyahu and Trump to talk. We are also expecting Netanyahu to talk to the presidents of Russia, as well as several countries in Europe. And earlier today, he spoke with Narendra Modi in India. So Netanyahu and Israel are trying to control the diplomatic reaction to this as well, as this very much continues.
All right, CNN's Oren Lieberman live for us tonight from Jerusalem. Thank you very much for joining us. Israel carried out preemptive strikes against Iran, targeting its nuclear facilities, its military sites. Explosions were heard this morning in the Iranian capital, Tehran. Israel has declared a state of emergency. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed more strikes against Iran if it chooses to retaliate. He has also said that he will eliminate Iran's nuclear threat and will continue this operation for as long as it takes. Meanwhile, Iranian state media is confirming repeated explosions and reports indicating that Iran has now begun launching drones towards Israel. Iranian leadership is also holding top security meetings in a response to the Israeli strikes. Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, has condemned the strikes, calling them an expression of Israel's, quote, evil nature. He's also warned that Israel will face severe punishment. He's vowed that Iran's armed forces will not relent. In fact, Tehran's Imam Khomeini airport has cancelled all flights and Iranian airspace is closed. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander Hossein Salami has been killed in the Israeli strikes. Meanwhile, the United States has seemingly distanced itself from the Israeli strikes. It is said that Israel has carried out these attacks in its own self-defense. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has said that the United States is not involved militarily in this operation. It's called Rising Lion. That's the name that the Israelis have given to this particular operation. And now U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to convene a high-level cabinet security meeting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, even as this conflict escalates. I want to go across to a very special guest who's joining us here in our studios, Israeli Ambassador to India, Reuven Azar. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with us. First things first, Israel today saying that it had launched these preemptive strikes on Iran, taking out some of the nuclear facilities, some of the top commanders of the Iranian military. What was the need for this preemptive strike?
Well, Zaka, first of all, allow me to repeat my condolences to the Indian people following the terrible plane crash yesterday. Our hearts are with the families, with the victims. We wish swift recovery for those who survived. And the Israelis stand with India in this difficult moment. Israel took action following very specific information that we obtained that the Iranians are assembling a nuclear weapon. They haven't not only accumulated fissile material to a weapons degree that would help them to create several bombs, but also dealt with the warhead itself. And that means that we have an imminent threat because the combination of a ballistic missile with fissile-enriched uranium, fissile material, and the means to weaponize it are an existential threat for Israel from a country that has sworn to destroy us many times. Israel had no choice. We have corroborated this with other intelligence agencies that have approved that information. And this is only 2 days after the IAEA has declared that Iran has breached the safeguards agreement, has cheated, has actually pursued a military nuclear program. So not only that we are defending ourselves to prevent a Holocaust, Israel, the Jewish people have suffered the Holocaust only 80 years ago. We are not willing to take that risk again.
But what was this assessment? How far soon, in your assessment, was Iran away from getting a nuclear device or
Weeks.
being capable of?
They were very short time of obtaining a nuclear weapon. They've been working on a nuclear warhead. And this is a situation in which you cannot take risk. Because imagine, you are talking here about a ballistic missile that carries a nuclear weapon. But it's not only that. Iran has been actually pursuing 3 tracks to destruct Israel. One was the military nuclear program. The second was the ballistic missile program, because each such a missile, even when it doesn't carry a nuclear warhead, it has 1,000 kilograms of TNT. They have thousands of them, and they were intending to build 10,000 ballistic missiles in the next 3 years and 20,000 in the next 6 years. So that, on a small country like Israel, that is half the size of Haryana or the size of Mizoram or Meghalaya, this is completely devastating. It's an existential threat. And those two tracks are without mentioning the third one, which is the war of proxies, the ring of fire they were creating around us that we've been dealing with for the last 18 months.
But Ambassador, what would you say to the people who are saying that Israel is basically now risking a wider regional war? This could possibly become a much bigger conflict because of the action you took this morning.
Well, when you have an existential threat, you have to act. Now, it's completely up to the Iranians to what extent they want to widen this war. We have seen a very clear statement from the United States warning Iran from not attacking the United States. We are coordinated with America. They respect our right for self-defense, but they are not part of this confrontation.
Why are they not part of this operation? I mean, they are your most steadfast ally. There's been some reports that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are not on the same page on this strategy of attacking Iranian nuclear sites.
That has proven to be complete nonsense, because we are completely in sync with the United States. It's just the United States respects the fact that this is a threat that we have to deal with, and we have the capabilities to deal with. So there's no reason why the United States should fight instead of Israel. Israel is ready to defend itself by itself, and this is part of our sovereignty and our independence.
But if it escalates, and Iran is now threatening, it is said it has sent some 100 drones towards Israel. If it escalates, you are confident that the United States will get drawn into this conflict?
Well, as I said, the United States doesn't have to be drawn into this conflict if Iran doesn't attack them.
But Iran is attacking. Iran has said it is
Israel.
escalating.
At this point, we have information, indeed, like you said, that there are 100 drones on the way to Israel. I guess that would be accompanied with a barrage of ballistic missiles, which take only a few minutes to arrive to Israel. We've seen that. We've seen the biggest barrage of ballistic missiles against Israel back in April. The Iranians already attacked us twice. As a result of that, we had to retaliate. We have removed some of the air defenses. And as I said before, the Iranians are exposed.
What is the objective? One is, of course, like you said, the nuclear threat, because you feel you have assessment that they were just days away from getting a nuclear weapon. You've also taken out some of their top commanders.
Yes, because the top commanders are those who are responsible for this plan of annihilation against Israel. And those commanders are the ones who are giving the directives to the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, to the Iranian armed forces, to attack Israel. And therefore, we felt obliged to defend ourselves and to neutralize them in that way.
So what is the end game here? Because like I said, Iran has said that it's going to retaliate. It is already sending drones. If that happens, and God forbid, if any of that is successful, then Israel will have to climb the escalation ladder as well. Again, we are on the brink of potentially a much bigger catastrophe.
Well, we hope that we'll be able to defend ourselves efficiently like we've done in the past. We are highly coordinated with our allies in the region. Israel is determined to continue retaliating against the Iranians as far as they continue their attacks against us. They will have to get to the conclusion on whether they want to continue that, because I think it will be detrimental to the future. Israel has built the capabilities necessary not only to defend ourselves, but also to destroy Iranian capabilities, and we are determined to continue until the Iranians realize that the demand of the international community, this is not just a threat against Israel, it's a threat against the world. And many of our neighbors are watching this with a lot of alarm, because they know that if the Iranians would continue that program, all of their countries would be subject to Iranian aggression. And we saw in the past how Iran took over 4 Arab capitals.
Yeah.
The only reason that these capitals, some of these capitals, have gone back to the Arab world is a result of the Israeli action. So it means that when we defend ourselves, we are also defending our neighbors, we are also defending the world.
But what about the nuclear talks? This basically just blows those talks out of the water. I mean, I think there were 5 rounds of talks that have already happened. Now there's no incentive for Iran to continue talking.
Zaka, talks can be efficient when they get to a result and not when they are being exploited by one of the sides in order to continue the program, the illicit program of building nuclear weapons. So we have a direct signal, a very clear signal from the IAEA that has determined that Iran has defied, has breached their safeguard agreement. Okay, they have been cheating for all these years. There have been many countries that tried to negotiate with Iran. The result must be clear. Iran cheated. Iran is a genocidal, radical Islamic state that wants to annihilate another state, and therefore they have lost the right to enrich uranium, and they have to get rid of the capability of having a nuclear fissile circle. And therefore, if they want in the future to use nuclear weapons for nuclear energy for electricity, the fissile material will have to be provided from outside. As long as they don't agree to that and they continue pursuing nuclear military capabilities, they will be susceptible by attacks by Israel and maybe by other states.
What about the statement from the Ministry of External Affairs? You must have seen that statement. They are calling for restraint from both sides, saying that both sides should refrain from escalating the situation. How do you respond to that?
Look, it's natural. The countries in the world will be interested in peace. I think that dialogue is always better than a military confrontation. And we are engaging with many countries in the world, presenting our case, explaining why we did what we did. We haven't seen condemnations from our friends,
but nobody's quite welcomed it. I mean, I saw a statement from UAE, from...
War is not something that you would welcome. Anybody would welcome, I think, but people understand, that Iran is a hostile country, is a radical country, is a country that has been, for years, not only pursuing nuclear weapons, but also proliferating weapons of mass destruction to proxies, to rogue elements. They have been a cause of instability in the region, and all diplomatic efforts to deviate them from such bad decision making has failed.
One final word. The war against Hamas has been going on for 20 months now, I think almost 20 months. When everyone was saying that Israel should now begin to draw down, or at least give an exit plan to end that war, you're now starting a new one. So is Israel going to be perpetually in a state of war?
Hopefully not. Israel is not, we are a democracy. We don't like wars. People are sick and tired of wars. We would like to sit and do what we like to do, which is have a normal life and develop an economy that actually is serving the entire world. Because we have been developing solutions that people use all over the world to create better life. But when you have forces in the region that are destined to annihilate you, look, the Iranians have a clear plan. It's not just regarding Israel. What they want to do is to have hegemony in the region, because for them, Jerusalem is the first stop to Mecca and Medina. They want to control the Islamic world. They want to have hegemony, and destroying Israel is part of their plan. So we have to make clear that that won't be possible. And when there is an imminent threat, like the one they have created now, we will act.
All right, Ambassador Reuben Azar, thank you very much for coming over to our studios and explaining the Israeli point of view as to why Israel was forced to take these preemptive strikes against Iran earlier this morning.
Dangerously close. This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Why is it that the flight AI 171 crashed in less than 60 seconds? There are several theories doing the rounds, so let's quickly take you one by one through the same, and then we'll bring in our experts to decode it for you further. The first big theory, as is being speculated, is whether or not this was a result of a bird hit. In rare cases, bird hit may impact both the engines, so that's one big speculation. The second theory, which is being spoken of widely, is double engine glitch. Both engines losing power simultaneously, leading to this kind of a plane crash, though aviation experts have pointed out very clearly that this is a rarity. Yet, it's not been ruled out completely. The third theory is that of fuel contamination. Fuel contamination could lead to fuel clogging, which could then result in engine failure. And the fourth theory, which is being spoken of widely, overloading. The crew has to correctly estimate total load of the plane. The total load of the plane is a combination of the fuel load, the passenger load and baggage load. Though this is a protocol, it's largely followed. So this is also something which is still in the realm of speculation. The load factor, though, is critical in summertime when air is thin. To decode this, to put this in perspective, DBS Gujral, former DG Flight Safety Air Costa, is with us in the studio. Mr. Gujral, appreciate you taking out your time. Thank you for speaking to us here on CNN News 18. There are so many questions, Mr. Gujral, that Indians today are asking to the civil aviation industry, DGCA, pointed questions on how this could have happened. Because to our minds, this is unheard of. A plane takes off. Within 30 to 60 seconds, it crashes into another building and the plane could not lift off. We've spoken of 4 factors, sir. First up, what's your assessment?
Let me start with this, that an accident of this kind where an aircraft is taking off and crashes within seconds is one of the most rare, perhaps first of its kind in the world. And most of the accidents, you would have noticed, they occur during the landing phase, right? Or sometimes we had mid-air collisions where the passengers died, the aircraft were destroyed. And in this particular case, as you have pointed out, there are 3-4 theories coming forward. It's sometimes very difficult to believe that a thing of this kind can happen, that the aircraft is perfectly fine, it is inspected, all checks are carried out during the transit. This aircraft flew from Delhi to Ahmedabad, and all transit checks as per the regulatory requirements were carried out, and then it was released for the flight from Ahmedabad to London. But surprisingly, up to the time of takeoff, there was absolutely no indication of any engine glitch or loss of power. The moment he rotated, rotation means the moment he started his takeoff, the problem started, wherein the pilot says that he is losing power, he is not able to lift, and as a last resort, he makes a mayday call to the air traffic control, and that was the last. And he has also recorded a message that he cannot lift, there is no power in the engines. Now, this is one very, I think, first case of its kind where both the engines have simultaneously failed. Now,
but are we certain about that, sir? The situation you're telling us would have been better than it was yesterday if one of the engines was working, or if this was not case of a dual engine failure?
If one of engine is working, at least you would have got the lift. The aircraft is designed in such a way that in the event of a failure of one engine, if he is in the cruise, he can continue the flight. There have been a similar incident in the past where an aircraft was coming from Hong Kong, and 2 hours away from Delhi, the pilot noticed that the right hand fuel tank was leaking, and he didn't have enough fuel to make it to Delhi. So after making all calculations, he shut down the right hand engine and he made a single engine landing at Calcutta. So what I mean to say is that if one engine is working, there is a risk, but it's minimized.
But we can't say for sure what could have been the reason for the engine
In this
failure. It could be
particular
any of
case,
the